Matvei Michkov is tearing it up in the KHL right now. We'll talk about that, Sam Dickinson, and our Game on the Line segment all coming up on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi and joined by Sebastian Hi, and we've got a packed episode for you today. First and foremost, we'll talk about Matvei Michkov tearing it up right now with HK Sochi in the KHL, including a 3-goal game against the team that loaned him out because they categorically refused to play them in their lineup. Moving on, we'll be talking about Sam Dickinson in our second segment, just talking about what he looks like right now, how he projects, and is he still the top defenseman in the 2024 NHL Draft? And then we'll end things off with our Game on the Line segment. If you're new here, we basically choose a player from a different round of the 2014 NHL Draft and build a starting 6 lineup to win a Game 7 Stanley Cup final. But before we get into any of it, I just want to remind you that our sponsor for today's episode is FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Now, as well, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So, Sebastian, let's talk about Matvei Michkov because we have to. First, the point totals, right? They're ridiculous.
He's doing great. I mean, he has 10 points in 8 KHL games with Sochi. I'm not counting the little 6-minute game he got with SKA before he got loaned out.
Classic.
He's doing exactly what Matvei Michkov does, which is put up point totals. Has he been the strongest defensive player in Sochi? No, not that he's very far off, considering it's a pretty weak team. But he's been playing tremendous hockey, and he's doing exactly what he does best. He is really pushing the pace. He's often the F1. He's constantly trying to push back at that defensive line, trying to get in behind, trying to create odd man rushes and breakaways. And he does it supremely well. I've watched most of the points that he's put up so far this season, and a lot of them are pretty high skill plays where he's flashing lane shifts and delays, and overall he's expanded his tool belt in terms of being able to hold up play on his own in the offensive zone, waiting for that support to arrive. And often he gets the puck back from that support to finish off an opportunity, but he's actually using his line mates a bit more effectively now than he was last season with the same Sochi team. So Michkov's doing incredibly well. He's definitely showing that he can produce offense in the KHL, and while Sochi is in a weaker division than SKA is, it was rather poetic to see Michkov put up a goal and 3 points against SKA in his return to beat the team that loaned him out. And I think Philadelphia has a pretty damn good prospect here.
Absolutely. I mean, that'll show you. Don't loan your players to teams that can give him ice time when you won't. That's what you get. He was playing with a chip on his shoulder in that game. I mean, he was buzzing around, even defensively. He was getting involved. He's trying to show his team, his former team, that he's able to hold his own in the areas that matter. And you know, we talk about Sochi being in a weaker division than SKA, but that also means that Michkov isn't as well surrounded as he is in SKA. It's a double-edged sword there, and he's definitely just the way that he carries himself and the way that he's constantly trying to prove people wrong. I mean, he should not have slipped to 7th overall. I don't think that's even a conversation to be had, really. I mean, he's an excellent player with so many good offensive tools, and he's developing the areas of his game that matter. He's not, I said in this draft year often that you're never really going to get a net positive defensive player from Matvei Michkov. I'm kind of starting to turn the corner on that. I mean, he's been showing some really good, impressive kind of small habits in this game. His stick positioning isn't ideal. His physical body positioning in terms of board battles, all that stuff isn't ideal. But the reads that he's making, the anticipation that he shows both offensively and defensively, has improved a ton over the offseason. That's one thing I've noticed as well. And he's always been a very instinctual, like the best thing about Michkov is the way that he reads offensive plays instinctually. He has a scoring instinct, this offensive instinct to always hit the right pockets at the right time. And to see him carry that into the defensive zone and show that he's able to read plays defensively the same way that he would read them offensively, and just kind of reverse engineer it in a way to understand what his opponents are going to do. I've been really, really impressed with what I've seen from Michkov so far this offseason. But, are we still talking about a player who you would take in the top 3 in a redraft?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
right?
Michkov had really solidified himself as a top 3 talent in my mind in the 2023 NHL Draft Class. I had him in the same tier as Fantilli, though I don't think I ever had Michkov over Fantilli in any ranking last season. But the closest it ever was at the very, very end. Like, Michkov continued to close that gap throughout the season in my eyes. Yeah. And while he never did fully overtake Fantilli in terms of the combination of upside and certainty and overall toolkit, he came really, really close. And if the draft cycle had been an extra, like, maybe 4 or 5 months of actual playing, that could have swapped for me. And Michkov is showing that right now. I mean, putting up 10 points in 8 KHL games is stupid good, as they would say.
For a 19-year-old?
It doesn't happen. It just doesn't. And you're seeing players like Anton Salayev, who produced like almost a point a game through 6 games, who's now fallen back down to half a point a game because scoring a lot of points just isn't sustainable in the KHL. Michkov's one of the very few players where I'm not really even expecting that to dip down very far. He wasn't all that far underneath a point a game last season with Sochi, and he's way over right now, 2 points over. So he's trending better than he was last season already in terms of production, and that is exactly what's like on the ice as well. I think he's playing better hockey than last season, but he's still the same Michkov. Like, this is the same electrifying, high-octane offensive player with a lightning-fast processor and tremendous creativity that can create pretty much anything on a dime. And he's doing that against some of the best competition in the world. And sure, Philadelphia has to wait 3 years to get him in their lineup. But when they do, they're adding a 21-year-old Matvei Michkov and a 3-year ELC, which is going to be disgusting for a really long time. So I think that Philly should be pretty happy with that draft pick as of right now.
Makes sense for sure. One more hypothetical, because I really want to have this discussion. Right now, are we looking at Matvei Michkov and Ivan Demidov in 5 years and still having the discussion as to who will be better? Because it's looking a lot tighter than it was previously to me, even though I absolutely love what Ivan Demidov is bringing to the table right now in the KHL. It's still a debate in my mind. Is it for you, or is Demidov clear right now and it's not an argument to be had? Like, how do you feel about that?
It's still hugely a debate. Like, I think when I've been making comparisons between Demidov and Michkov, I've been really careful in terms of framing it around, okay, Demidov now versus Michkov a year ago, rather than like those like comparisons between like a 19-year-old player and an 18 or 17-year-old player. I just think there's a big gap in terms of the age there. Yeah, I think that if you're making the argument of Demidov versus Michkov at the same age, I'd definitely take Demidov, just because Michkov at the beginning of last draft year was rough to watch in many ways. But the development that he underwent afterwards, after he joined Sochi, was so tremendous that it has to be a debate whether he or Demidov project as the better player at this point in time, because we cannot expect Demidov to replicate Michkov's development trajectory, which has just been insane over the last like 7-8 months. So it's still very, very much a debate in my eyes, and both players are going to be excellent for decades. But as of right now, I don't know which of the two is going to be the better in the end. But both are tremendously fun, really skilled. Demidov has the higher floor, I would argue, but in terms of the pure upside, it's still a coin toss in my eyes.
I definitely agree. What's for sure is if Demidov follows what Matvei Michkov's progression was over the draft year, it's not going to be an argument at all. But we'll see
For
about that
sure.
as the year goes on.
Yeah.
That's it for this first segment here. Now we're going to go into our second segment where we talk about Sam Dickinson, what he projects as, what his profile is. We'll go in depth about that and talk about whether or not he's still the 2024 NHL Draft's top defenseman. But before we get into it, a quick word from our sponsors over at FanDuel.
Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time than doing it right now because you can use those bonus bets on anything ranging from spreads to player props to over and unders and far more. So visit fanduel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
All right, so moving on to our second segment, we'll talk about Sam Dickinson, a top 2024 NHL draft eligible who stood out very early in the draft year, making himself kind of front runner among defensemen in the 2024 draft to be the top defenseman picked in that draft. But let's talk a bit about how he sees the game, how he plays the game, what kind of profile you'd be getting in a player like this, and whether or not he's still the top 2024 defenseman. Let's start with this kind of mental mapping of the game. How do you process it? How do you see that in his game? How does it manifest, and how much do you like it?
I think he does it excellently defensively. He's really, really good at mapping a play when it's in front of him. So when he's skating backwards down the ice against the rush, he's really, really capable to map every single threat that's on the ice. I see a bit more problems when you do it in offensive situations when he maybe has his back turned to defenders to keep track of those. That can be a little bit more complicated. But as a whole, defensively, I think that his processing speed, his overall mental map of the ice, of threats, and his overall professional style habits in the defensive zone are all well above par. He's really strong defensively, and he's really, really intelligent. He knows how to stop as many threats as he possibly can. He's quite capable in multi-threat situations to stay controlled and not to overextend on either side if he's the only defender back. He's really, really quite calculated in the risks that he takes and maybe the aggressive gap closing that he might entertain as an option. Offensively, again, it's a bit more of a work in progress. He hasn't gotten the same amount of reps in the offensive zone as he has defensively so far in the OHL, and I think that's definitely a factor here in terms of just how refined or lack thereof there is in his offensive game. But I think that there's a lot of improvement there that's very possible this season as he gets that bigger offensive role with London. Because last season you had guys like Logan Mailloux that were really blocking his path up that lineup. And this season, again, he is at least tentatively the top defenseman in this draft class in terms of public opinion. A couple other big names in there like Adam Jiricek and Anton Salayev, for instance. Artem Loshunov is also another name that's definitely been bubbling around a lot in prospect discussions. But I think that Dickinson's the one that has the most like unilateral positive acclaim so far from the scouting sphere. You'll be hard pressed to find a scout that is not a big fan of Sam Dickinson.
That's what I was going to say. Like you'd be hard pressed to find anyone right now in the scouting community that's talking badly about Dickinson, saying that he's having poor performances, not having major concerns in his game. He's a fairly well-rounded product, and for me, he's one of the most mature players, both physically and mentally, in this draft. Huge. Like you said, his mapping of the ice defensively, his ability to understand players' patterns and habits, his ability to adapt quickly to changes of direction on the puck, that kind of thing, and most especially his strength one-on-one is he's so solid. You're usually, if you're the coach of the London Knights and you see an opposing player going one-on-one against Sam Dickinson, I don't think you're worried one bit. I don't think there's any concern at all there. The issue for me is you see Dickinson as a player who's really put all his eggs in the defensive basket. He's still got some decent tools offensively, but mainly has pigeonholed himself into a defensive role. That's what I'm concerned about. because exploration is the best way to develop new areas of your game and add new things to your repertoire. And as much as I like what Sam Dickinson does defensively, I don't think he has much to learn there. So my question is, how much is he willing to explore offensively? How much is he willing to activate in the offensive zone, pinch down the boards with the puck, go behind the net, find options to pass pucks to the slot, and just get those reps in order for those to become regular, consistent, constant elements of his game, right? But that's kind of the mental element of it, is how daring he is with the puck, how composed he is defensively, all that stuff. But the physical tools, there's really no question about it. I mean, he's a man amongst boys right now in the OHL, and especially was at the Linka Gretzky Cup. It wasn't even a question. He was bullying people around, not even trying to be physical or violent at like a Caden Gooley type of player, just by virtue of being him and being in the space that he occupies. He was just pushing players around. The skating as well is fairly impressive. It's a developed, polished stride. It's not perfect, but there's a lot of small details in his posture that make it really easy for him to go from facing forward to facing backwards. Those pivots are really important when you're a defenseman going back for retrievals. So yeah, I'm fairly impressed with the overall package. But in terms of projection, I want your thoughts on this. I mean, I don't necessarily see a true bona fide top pair defenseman. And I feel like in a draft year like this, with this many defensemen available, if I'm going to pick a defenseman as my first defenseman off the board, I want them to have at least some true bona fide top pair, number one, number two upside. Do you see that at all with Dickinson? Or is this the kind of thing where it's hit or miss there?
I do still see it. I think a lot of that hangs on seeing how he's able to manage bigger offensive minutes in the OHL this year, because he will get chances in London. This is a contending team, and he is a very, very skilled player. They're going to have to use him to make a push for the playoffs and to go deep in that run. But yeah, I think we're going to definitely see with the offense. I see his defensive like foundation. I see his mobility. I see the intelligence. I see the composure. I see the high-end physical tools. And I see a player that can be molded into a top pairing defenseman. And whether the offensive game is able to pop in terms of the exploration, the creativity, the game-breaking skill, I don't know. But what I do think could happen is that he becomes a capable distributor inside the offensive zone, that he's able to layer enough deceptive qualities into his on-puck game to attract individual defenders, create some space, change the angle of attack, get the puck to a teammate in space, and go back into space along the blue line or further pinch up through the slot or behind the net. I think that there are these systems that he could easily fall into, and because of his intelligence, he can be really, really effective in them. I just don't think that he's the type of player that's going to excel in the type of hyper fluid offensive system that you might want to give a Lane Hudson, for instance, or a Cale Makar. But as long as he has some structure to go off of, and there is like this structured plan of attack of giving him quite detailed instructions of how to kind of shift the focus to himself in order to open space for his teammates, then I think there's more upside with this player as long as he fits into that type of system. So I think that if a team drafts him like 5th overall or something, there's definitely a chance that they get a top pair defenseman out of him. Like if you compare Sam Dickinson to this past year's defenseman that went high, I would, at least as of right now, I like his production more than David Reinbacher's. I struggle more with the Simashev. I think that's more of a toss-up between the two. They're very similar in many ways. But I think Dickinson's going to have more opportunities as draftier than Simashev did last year, where he's stuck in the MHL for most of the season. And Dickinson could be the number 1 D on the best team in the OHL, depending how it goes for London this year. But yeah, I think he's really, really interesting. And I do think that his intelligence and defensive game give him the potential of being that more shutdown presence on a top pairing. But the offensive game definitely still has some unlocking to do to even like get up that far into a lineup, because if there isn't like significant work done on the offensive front, then a second pair role is a lot easier to project here.
No, 100%. Fully agreed. So yeah, I mean, I'm very interested to see how this year develops for him, because I think that this is going to be a big benchmark in terms of, if we see those activations, if we see the more confident, puck retention in order to absorb teammates to draw them in and free up someone else, that projection is going to change. I'm just not convinced of the number one, maybe a number two, number three, but I'm still not on board with that number one defenseman projection. But that wraps things up for Sam Dickinson in our second segment. Now we'll go into our game on the line segment for the 2014 NHL Draft right after these words from our sponsors over at Indeed. When you're drafting your fantasy team, do you ever wish you could do the same thing with your business team? If you're building a roster to win the league, you do absolutely need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place, which is very practical. You won't need to spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills, with the right experience, all that stuff, when Indeed can sort that out for you. They've got a new feature called Instant Match. Instant Match basically is a kind of sponsor for your posts that you can post out there, and you immediately get a short list of quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed basically match exactly what you're looking for. And then once that short list is up, you can just click on their profile and invite them to apply right away. Indeed does the hard work for you. So you sponsor a job, and then immediately you get an instant match, which shows you candidates that fit your description and allow you to kind of speed up that process and make it a lot easier. As we speak right now, there are already 16 hires that were made in Indeed within this last minute. So that shows you how useful this app is and this website is in terms of helping you out in terms of finding candidates for your job. Indeed knows that when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. And that's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your job requirements. So visit Indeed.com/locked-on to start hiring right now. Again, that's Indeed.com/locked-on. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. But if you need to hire, you need Indeed. All right, so ending things off with our game on the line segment for the 2014 NHL Draft. We had an interesting discussion about this pre-recording. We have a differing kind of approach to this. So we'll start with the forward core. I mean, you have Leon Draisaitl in this draft class. You went for him. I didn't.
Yeah, you didn't.
There's a reason for that, and it's mainly because I am a massive, massive fan of David Pastrnak, and with Brayden Point available in the third round, I decided to keep my first round pick for Pastrnak, even though Draisaitl is definitely the higher point total producer. He's definitely a more well-rounded offensive player. I feel like David Pastrnak on his own with Brayden Point would be a bit more effective than Draisaitl and Point. And then it's just about who you put on that wing. So my front three, and with Brayden Point of the Tampa Bay Lightning, David Pastrnak of the Boston Bruins in the first round, and then I went with Victor Olofsson, who was drafted in the 7th round by the Buffalo Sabres. Talk me through the difference between my lineup and yours, because it's really just one player at the forward position, right?
I mean, I also went with Brayden Point and Victor Olofsson. I wanted the extra goal scoring that Olofsson brings, which is basically all he's going to bring to this lineup. But I wanted that extra triggerman, just to be an extra nuisance around the net. And I did go with Leon Draisaitl down the middle. Oh, sorry, on the wing. I have Brayden Point as my center, and I have Draisaitl playing on the wing because he plays a bit of everywhere, depending if he's playing with or without Connor McDavid. I went with Draisaitl because I love just the diversity in his game that he can bring, both as a winger, as a center. I like being able to have a second faceoff option. If Point gets chased, for instance, having someone else that can come up and win a faceoff for me, that's great to have. On top of that, he is a true dual threat scorer. He has one of the best shots in the league and is one of the top playmakers in the league. He's the primary playmaker on my top line here, and him and Point are somehow my top 2 goal scorers, despite Victor Olofsson also sitting there as a pure goal scorer. And overall, I think that this is a really potent trio. And while they are more finishing like focused in terms of putting the puck in the net, I have some extra playmaking coming from my blue line, which is why I felt really comfortable having 3 really, really high-end goal scorers on the same line here.
For sure, yeah. I went with a different route for the defense pair as well. I believe you kept your 4th-round pick to for the netminder. I went
I
with
did
Devon
indeed.
Taves. Yeah, I went
Yeah.
with Devon Taves instead with that 4th-round pick on the left side, and I went with Gustav Forsling of the Florida Panthers, who was, I believe, a 5th-round pick.
He was.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I've paired them together. I feel like this combination works really well. I'm a huge fan of what Devon Taves brings to the table. He's one of the best puck movers in the league in terms of
Yeah.
defensemen. Extremely good on rush defending. One of the smartest defensemen in the NHL as well. Really capable of kind of identifying his surroundings, identifying quickly what his threats are. He scans constantly. So that combination of skills would be very interesting. I mean, we're looking at Gustav Forsling, who's also a very good, playmaking player, but I feel like that combination of skills will allow the netminder to play a bit more aggressively, to throw pucks in corners, knowing that he's got 2 fantastic skaters and breakout players on the D line. But talk me through your decor and what you went for at the back end on the blue line there.
I also went with Forsling as my left defenseman, and for my right shot defenseman, I spent a higher round pick, but I got a worse player. I obviously would have liked to downgrade that to snap up Devon Taves too, but I went with Brandon Montour, who I'm also really happy with. I think him and Forsling, I mean, they have played together already in Florida, and they are 2 pure playmakers from the blue line. And while they don't offer the biggest defensive support, I felt comfortable doing that because I did spend my 4th-round draft pick on a goaltender who gives me a lot of extra safety back there. And so Forsling and Montour are both really high-end playmakers, and Montour really broke out last season when he was finally kind of given the green light to play a fluid style of hockey in a system that allowed him and encouraged him to do so. And
Sure.
he really popped off. It was a really important thing, a shift in coaching styles that really complemented his game. And I think that both him and Forsling are going to create a lot of opportunities for my front 3 to put the puck in the net. And I'm pretty happy with it. And while I do think my lineup's going to give up quite a few high danger chances, because I have Shesterkin in goal with my 4th-round draft pick, one of the best goaltenders in the world, I feel pretty comfortable with it. He was able to somehow drag an awful New York Rangers lineup to the Eastern Conference Final a year ago. So I'm pretty confident with him in net for a Stanley Cup Final Game 7 overtime.
Definitely agreed. I went with a 2nd-round draft pick for my goaltender because I really wanted Devon Taves. I went with Thatcher Demko of the Vancouver Canucks, and it is a definite downgrade on Shesterkin, but I don't feel that it's as big a downgrade as it's been made out to be. I feel like Shesterkin is definitely one of the best goaltenders, if not the best goaltender in the NHL. But Demko, I feel, is maybe a tier, maybe at most 2 below him. I'm a big fan of what Demko can do, and I feel like he's not quite done rounding out his game and developing as a netminder in Vancouver. He could end up being their starting goaltender for years to come, including once they rebuild properly and decide it's time to get rid of all the deadweight contracts that have been building up on that side. I feel like he could be a centerpiece of the earlier end of that completed rebuild as the Canucks become contenders. He could become something special because he's very mobile, he's very athletic, he's very aware, especially his puck tracking is exceptionally good. He can get caught out of position at times, can get a bit too aggressive. But with Taves and Forsling in front of him, I'm not too worried. I'm more confident in the trio of Taves, Forsling, and Demko than I am in the trio of Forsling, Montour, and Shesterkin. Crazy as that may be, that just speaks to how much I just love Devon Taves so damn much, and I think that on
I
his
do
own,
too. I still see a massive gap between Demko and Shesterkin. So it hurt me to pass on Devon Taves because I think he's one of the best and most underrated defensemen somehow still in the league. So yeah, I think that he's a great pick. I just think that Shesterkin gives me a bit of an edge here, and that pick specifically allowed me to build a really high octane offensive lineup without being too afraid of conceding a goal because I have Shesterkin in goal.
It makes sense for sure. But let us know in the comments below which of our two teams you think would win. This has been it for today's episode. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you've liked what you've been watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on in sports. And make sure to tune in for our next episode as we discuss David Reinbacher, Kasper Halttunen, and another game on the line segment. This has been Hadi with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.